Hi, I'm James Governor, co-founder of Redmonk, the developer-focused industry analyst company. And I'm here to talk about Google Cloud Next OnAir for 2020. So this is Google's premier event for Google Cloud over the course of a year. And like every other company in tech, it's had to completely rethink how it did things. So rather than being like 4 days in San Francisco, suddenly we had to think, well, how do we turn this into a virtual event that people could dip in and dip out of? Google took the approach to spread it flat. So it was a 9-week event. It was a veritable marathon rather than the usual sprint. And that was quite interesting because it meant that you could dip in and dip out of content. Obviously, you could use YouTube to watch those talks. Some of it was live content. They wanted to be able to make sure that Google could talk to its customers, to press, to analysts, to developers. But basically, it was a long haul. So, some things that interested me. Obviously, Google's been in this repositioning mode, certainly very, very clearly focused on the enterprise. And with that in mind, there were some sort of words that struck me really pretty clearly. So when we were listening to Thomas Kurian, who runs the business, talking about mainframes, VMware, SAP, even AS400. He mentioned AS400 about 4 times. This was a very, very different Google. This was a Google saying to the enterprise, we're going to meet you where you are. And that's one of the things that the enterprise wants to hear. And that's one of the things that Google has historically not been great at. So that message came through loud and clear. Legacy workloads, that's fine. We'll work with you to get them into the cloud. The Anthos story remains front and center for Google. There, what they've done is they've said, basically, we're going to smoosh together hybrid cloud and multi-cloud as sort of one story and really focus on allowing its customers to have a lot of portability about where it runs workloads. Even BigQuery now, the idea that we could run BigQuery on AWS, that's fairly transformative, at least from an industry narrative perspective, because in general, we'd be thinking, wait, the best people to manage something would surely be on their own cloud. But Google's taken a view that it has to be middleware, and that's something that enterprises understand and that enterprises historically want to buy. So let's talk about enterprises. Google had a swath of new deals, big transformations. Some of them were labeled as 10-year deals. This is not your grandmother's cloud. Things have changed. 10-year deals. So they'd signed up customers like Sabre, the Mayo Clinic, Renault, Orange, Telefonica. Lots of new wins in Europe, and I think that's interesting as well, because if we look at the way that Google has invested in Europe, Chris Chiori came from Salesforce. He had a big growth surge ahead of him, but he actually moved to Google to do the playbook again. And so we've seen European companies in conversations with Google, big investments from Google in Europe, and I think we can expect to see that a much broader set of its revenues going forward. So big focus, as I say, on enterprise. That was clear. Enterprise, legacy, focusing on industry verticals. And that's the main thing that we're going to hear from Google for now and the foreseeable future. That said, one of the things that made me happy is I sort of feel that Google slept on Cloud Run a little bit. Cloud Run is an interesting product, interesting platform. Basically, it's this idea you can take your container and just deploy it to the cloud super easy. So you've got your Docker container and boom, you're done. It deals with all of the URLs, all of the security, everything you need to worry about. So the developer isn't yak shaving, they're focusing on development. And I thought one of the things at Cloud Next OnAir that I heard at least was a renewed and continued focus on Cloud Run and making sure that enterprises knew that was a product for them, but also that modern web developers would also be very, very keen to use that. And I think that's interesting. I'd like to see more attention there. The final thing I'm going to talk about is API management. So obviously Google, a couple of years back, they bought Apigee. They've had that, again, enterprise, top-down, federated sort of API management market that they've gone after. But they're building a new tool, which is going to be cloud native. And I think that's important, and I'd like to see more investment there. So that was really interesting to me because that's one of the areas that Amazon, with Amazon Web Services, Amplify and Lambda has been very effective, moving really quickly, putting forward a really strong value proposition for developers that want to use GraphQL, that want to use rich front ends, accessing back-end services in this new client serverless model. So Google didn't announce all of that, but I do think that having a cloud native API management platform is a great opportunity for them to move forward. If we get integrations with Cloud Run, we'll have a pretty solid platform for developers that want to develop in Docker, access a bunch of APIs. I think that's what we'll see more of, and that's certainly an area that I'd like to see Google invest more in. But as I say, it's enterprises, it's legacy, it's supporting the customer, and hopefully continuing to support developers with effective user experience, because that's one of the things that Google has actually done well. Google Cloud, in terms of its shell, in terms of the developer experience and the operator experience, has strengths, and it needs to make sure it doesn't lose those. Because too often, organizations that are selling to enterprises, they give you every configuration you could ever have, but they lose usability in the process. So, it's 2020. I've had 9 weeks of this event. I've learned a lot. Maybe next week, 4 weeks would be enough. But overall, good event. Thanks, Google. And it's a difficult year. How do we get those kind of high production values, the video, the audio, and make all of that work? Well, Google did all of that pretty well. So overall, as I say, decent event. And I'll continue to watch that enterprise story because, of course, that's the big transition. That's one of the things that Redmonk likes to help people understand, how developers are affecting the choices that enterprises make and how cloud companies and the way they build is being adopted and embraced more broadly.